Welcome to today's Explainer. We're embarking on a massive quest today to answer one fundamental question. What exactly are we? We're going to bridge two incredible worlds here, going from the fascinating history of medical illustrations all the way to some truly groundbreaking German philosophy.
So let's dive right into this immense mystery. We'll be exploring how humanity has historically attempted to define and map itself. It's a fascinating evolution, tracking our attempts to draw the tangible, physical body all the way to our efforts to map the totally intangible mind.
To set our baseline, we really have to start with the physical. How do we visualize the actual machinery of our bodies? Historically, this has been the domain of anatomy and medical infographics. Because before we can ask those big, heavy philosophical questions about the human spirit, we first need to understand how we even came to view our own physical form.
Here is our roadmap for the explainer. First, the dreaming of the human body. Second, the industrial palace. Third, the anthropological question. Fourth, the ladder of life. And finally, spirit versus life. Section 1. Dreaming the human body. Art and anatomy collide. Let's take a look at the historical struggle to capture the human form on paper. This timeline beautifully compresses the history of anatomical illustration pulled from the National Library of Medicine's archives. It is not just a history of science, it's really a history of how we saw ourselves. We kick things off in the 1500s with what's called anatomical dreamtime. This was an era absolutely filled with fanciful metaphors, where cadavers were literally depicted playing around or showing off. Then, moving from 1680 to 1800, we hit the getting real phase. And this was a pretty jarring shift for folks who were used to beautiful, fanciful art because anatomists suddenly started demanding strict, and honestly sometimes radically ugly scientific realism. Finally, from 1800 to the present, we enter the visionary and visible era, where modern technological imaging seamlessly blends right back into fine art.
As you can tell, our visual mapping of the body evolved dramatically over time. We started out with that playful, highly metaphorical dream anatomy, spearheaded by figures like Andreas Vesalius, who actually founded modern anatomy. But eventually, the scientific community pushed back hard against all that theatrical death imagery. They wanted extreme realism, stripping away the metaphors entirely. Yet, flash forward to today, with things like the Visible Human Project, and we've circled back to a space where art and cutting-edge science mix together again. We've just always needed visuals to make sense of our inner workings. Section 2. The Industrial Palace. Modern Metaphors for Biology. Now, let's jump forward and see how our physical metaphors got a massive technological upgrade in the 20th century. Meet Dr. Fritz Kahn. He was a Berlin gynecologist writing in the 1920s. Kahn looked around at his booming industrial society and realized something absolutely brilliant. He figured out he could explain complex invisible biology by comparing our bodies directly to the brand new technologies of the 20th century. It was a real game changer that completely shifted the paradigm. In his 1926 masterwork, Man as Industrial Palace, Kahn presented a highly structured, whimsical way to look at the human body as a literal factory. Think about it. He drew the eye as a camera. He depicted enzymes as tiny industrial workers breaking down complex packages. He even envisioned the brain as a boardroom of homunculus, basically tiny little people, reading and planning out our actions. He even conceptualized the doctor of the future, which eerily predicted modern telemedicine by showing a physician monitoring patients via screens and buttons. Kahn made biology incredibly accessible simply by making it mechanical.
But check out this quote from Dr. Lewis Thomas, because it raises a really critical point about this mechanical worldview. He wrote that if medicine is just about these mechanical metaphors, doctors might just end up looking after machines. And honestly, if you've ever felt like just a cog in a machine at work, that quote probably hits pretty close to home. If we define ourselves purely as industrial palaces, do we just reduce the whole human experience to plumbing and wiring? Is that really the whole shebang?
Section 3. The anthropological question. Beyond the mechanical body. And that perfect pivot brings us right to our transition from the anatomy of the physical body to the anatomy of the mind. To really grasp this metaphysical side, we are turning to a heavy hitter, the foundational texts of German philosophical anthropology. Specifically, we'll be diving into an analysis by Heinz Wiedergegeben, which unpacks the revolutionary 1928 work of philosopher Max Scheler. Scheler looked closely at the profound crisis of meaning during his era. He saw that traditional theology, philosophy, and biology were totally fractured. So he realized that to truly understand what a human is, we literally have to wipe the slate clean and look at how we actually differ from the rest of the natural biological world.
Section 4. The Ladder of Life. Scheler's Hierarchy of Psychical Life. To find that unique difference,
Scheler mapped out the entire living world into a structured hierarchy.
We can visualize Scheler's pretty dense philosophy as a staircase of life. Down at the bottom, we have plants, which possess what he calls Gefühlsdrang, or a basic feeling drive. They move towards light, away from harm, but completely without consciousness. Step 2 is instinct, which we see in animals, where behavior is locked into rigid, unchanging rhythms. Step 3 is associative memory, where animals actually learn from habit and repetition. And finally, step 4 is practical intelligence, which is the ability to spontaneously solve brand new problems without trial and error.
Now, what's truly fascinating about this is that Scheler insists animals actually possess practical intelligence and memory. Based on studies of chimpanzees, he argued that animals can choose, they can act purposefully, and they show genuine intelligence. So the totally shocking conclusion back in 1928 was this: intelligence is not the defining human trait. It is merely a higher biological function. Section 5, Spirit versus Life, the ultimate differentiator. So the absolutely crucial question remains, if it isn't intelligence or memory that makes us uniquely human, what on earth is it? Well, Scheler introduces a completely new principle here, one that stands entirely outside of biology. He calls it Geist, or spirit. The animal is completely bound to its environment. It has to constantly affirm reality and is ultimately a slave to its biological drives. But the human, we are what Scheler calls weltoffen, meaning open to the world. We can step back, we can objectify our surroundings, and most importantly, we are the ultimate ascetics of life. That means we are the one creature in the cosmos capable of intentionally saying no to our own biological cravings.
But here is the fascinating catch. Spirit, on its own, is powerless. It needs energy. By saying no to our inner biological factories and drives, we execute a process called sublimation. We transfer that raw biological, mechanical energy into the guiding, meaningful realm of the spirit. Essentially, we starve our basic impulses to feed our culture, our art, and our intellect.
This brings our entire explainer together into one ultimate synthesis. We have Dr. Kahn's mechanical drives, the industrial palace pumping inside us, giving us power and energy. But we also have Scheler's metaphysical spirit. We need the raw life force for energy, sure, but we need the spirit to ideate, to find meaning, and to look beyond our immediate environment. The body is our engine, but the spirit is our steering wheel.
So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. Armed with both our mechanical, industrial drives and our incredibly world-open spirit, what incredible realities are we capable of shaping next? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay curious and keep exploring.